Ma a mio giudizio è uno studio importante, oltre che per quanto riguarda il sistema delle concessioni idroelettriche, che per la nostra politica energetica, quindi anche per tutta l'economia reale, riveste una grande importanza, dovrebbe portarci a riflettere sulla politica della concorrenza. La concorrenza è un valore fondante della nostra Unione Europea, è un principio che noi dobbiamo difendere ad ogni modo se vogliamo sviluppare il mercato interno, se vogliamo sviluppare la competitività del nostro sistema, ma dobbiamo fare in modo che le regole che applicano o che difendono questo principio siano al passo con i tempi. Io voglio fare una citazione della mia prima lezione di filosofia del diritto, quando ero giovane studente universitario. Il professore chiese a me e ai miei colleghi perché i vecchi palazzi di giustizia nella fine Ottocento, inizio Novecento, venivano costruiti vicino ai fiumi. Nessuno di noi seppe rispondere, il professore ci spiegò che il palazzo rimaneva fermo perché era il valore del diritto, l'importanza del diritto, ma le regole che applicavano il diritto si muovevano come si muove l'acqua del fiume, quindi cambiavano. E questo discorso vale per le regole della concorrenza. Se noi vogliamo competere a livello globale, se vogliamo che il nostro sistema sia veramente moderno e competitivo, dobbiamo avere due livelli di concorrenza, uno che garantisca l'accesso e la competitività all'interno dell'Unione e un altro che garantisca la competitività a livello globale. E il costo dell'energia è uno dei temi fondamentali se vogliamo competere a livello globale. Ora credo che per quanto riguarda le concessioni idroelettriche l'Europa debba compiere un passo in avanti. Serve armonizzare il sistema se vogliamo veramente che tutti i paesi e tutte le imprese che lavorano nei diversi paesi utilizzando l'energia siano competitive. Perché in alcuni Stati membri le concessioni sono senza scadenza, pensiamo alla Finlandia e alla Svezia, o in altri paesi le concessioni hanno delle proroghe continue, quindi infatti sono quasi senza scadenza, penso all'Austria, alla Bulgaria e alla Germania. E paradossalmente i paesi che, come il nostro paese di origine, Patrizia, cerca di essere più moderno, cioè di aprire il mercato ad altri soggetti, rischia di subire delle sanzioni perché poi magari all'Europa non piacciono le norme con le quali vengono regolati gli appalti per concedere la concessione. Quindi chi apre il mercato è penalizzato rispetto a chi non lo apre. È un paradosso incredibile al quale bisogna porre rimedio. Oggi, nell'ambito del mercato interno dell'Unione Europea, paesi come l'Italia e la Francia sono paesi che possono, per quanto riguarda l'energia idroelettrica, competere meno di altri paesi. Questo credo che questa disparità di trattamento debba portarci a una riflessione e soprattutto debba spingere noi politici, valutando le analisi che gli esperti fanno, valutando anche questa interessante relazione e studio dell'European University Institute, a fare di più, veramente ad aprire un grande dibattito sulla politica della concorrenza in Europa, perché altrimenti rischiamo di continuare a discutere, di vedere il piccolo problema e non vedere l'origine del problema. Ecco perché credo che si debba fare un salto in avanti e ritengo che il dibattito, lo stimolo che vi do, anche perché questa battaglia l'ho condotta quando ero commissario in tanti altri settori, è quello di discutere su come si possa difendere meglio il valore della concorrenza cambiando le regole obsolete che un tempo tutelavano la concorrenza, ma oggi invece finiscono per ridurne l'efficacia. Se noi vogliamo un mercato interno forte, se vogliamo un mercato unico dell'energia in Europa, dobbiamo cambiare, dobbiamo fare un passo in avanti. Questo spetta alla politica, ma la politica deve poter decidere sulle basi degli studi che gli esperti fanno, ma anche sulla base dei dibattiti che si sviluppano tra stakeholders, tra esperti e naturalmente anche tra politici, perché anche la platea degli interlocutori di oggi è molto diversificata. Prego, lo spunto che io ritengo più importante sia proprio quello legato alla politica della concorrenza, partendo dalla questione delle concessioni idroelettriche per arrivare all'elemento fondamentale, alle regole fondamentali, perché se non si va al cuore del problema, anche il tema delle concessioni idroelettriche rischierà di non essere risolto e ci saranno figli e figliastri in un'Europa invece che dovrebbe essere sempre più unita. Ci battiamo, almeno noi che siamo qui, contro l'abbattimento di Schengen, ma se vogliamo essere coerenti, se vogliamo difendere il mercato interno, dobbiamo anche fare in modo che le regole della concorrenza che garantiscono lo sviluppo del mercato interno siano eque e all'altezza dei tempi. Vi ringrazio.
Grazie a te e quando avrai bisogno di allontanarti potrai farlo tranquillamente. Sappiamo che ci ritroveremo poi per i seguiti di questo incontro, per le battaglie che dovremo fare successivamente. Do senza perdere ulteriore tempo, col consenso del mio collega Denanot che chiuderà, la parola al professor Jean-Michel Glachant che ci illustrerà, diciamo, stando nei tempi, questo studio di cui disponiamo anche di un summary che è stato dato a tutti voi, o è disponibile per tutti voi.
1,000 thanks, Patrizia, Toia. I would like to thank you as Vice Chair of ITRE and your colleague, Vice President of the European Parliament, and also the MEP Denanot, my compatriot, to host us. Whom are we, which is the key in this debate? We are a European school. We are located in Florence, but it's like this. We are only European. We belong to the only European university in Europe, which is located in Florence, and we have our own treaty, but we fully belong to European institutions. And second, energy is our raison d'être. We have been created by European energy regulators 12 years ago, when they did see that they have to Europeanize their thinking, to Europeanize their practice, because national regulators have the responsibility of building the internal market, but the internal market is not national. It's a common good of the Europeans. That's why we, Florence School, intervene. Next, you can go. And we do it in different ways. We do training. We produce about 2,000 person days of training a year. We produce about 30 debates a year. And we produce research. We have about 2,000 pieces of research, papers or videos or webinars or video lectures or podcasts fully available for free online. And we are a reference for energy regulation from the US to Brazil to sub-Saharan Africa, Egypt, China. Next. The debate of today is really key because it's a European debate. For us, it's not a national one at all. The first thing is, at European level, DG Comp is doing something with hydro rights, DG Environment is doing something else, DG Grow is doing something else again, and DG Energy would like to have no silo approach of energy components of energy decisions. So the question is, shouldn't we harmonize the way we give access to hydro and the way we use hydro? And whom should do the first step in the harmonization? If Commission is not doing, could it be the Parliament, or a coalition of member states, or a coalition of stakeholders? Next. The debate is key today because since 1 year we are in energy union. So we want to do more at European level. We want to stop the disunion. We want to put together all these pillars presented by Šefčovič 1 year ago. We want to put together the internal market, the security of supply, the sustainability, the research, and a string of innovation. And all of this has to be put closely together. Why? Because we have enormous challenges if we think decarbonization, COP21, 2050 objective. And we need so much union regarding the energy and the decarbonization challenges that we also need to unite energy with agriculture, transportation, housing. Everywhere we use energy, we have sustainability challenges. All of this should have some coherence to permit us to fully decarbonize the world and our economy. Hydro is key 2 times in the debate we have regarding COP21 implementation and decarbonization of the world. First, hydro is mainly clean, not entirely, because sometimes we have to build this or that dam, but mainly clean. And second, hydro is extremely flexible when it is stored. And the flexibility of hydro is something which was used in the past to complement fossil or a quasi-fossil fuel, but today hydro is what we use to complement renewables. It complements nicely wind and solar, which are volatile. And the storage of hydro is a fantastic complement to wind and solar. It is so fantastic that it's key to the success of the European policy of decarbonization. You can forget all the rest. And now the way a Commission is approaching it. DG Comp is opening a case against this and that country. Here you can see France and Italy. DG Environment is opening the case against other countries. DG Grow is opening the case again about other countries. Sometimes 2 different DGs are opening a case against the same country with 2 different approaches. But okay, it was the past, so let's assume that it's the past. We can think that water can be approached in different ways, which is true. But regarding the fact that renewable is key for the future and flexibility of hydro is key for the success of decarbonization, which means key for the success of sustainability. So it's on the table for decades. Shouldn't we have a real European common approach? And if so, DG Energy should have a role. And I guess that's it. And you can see that in Florence, we have a close link with the agency created in Ljubljana, the European Agency for Energy Regulation, because like this agency, we have a true European approach and European spirit. Now, all the details about the study will be given by Vincent. And Vincent, you will have to be creative because, as you see, no slides can be used. You are younger than me, so you should be several times more innovative than me. Vincent, you have the floor.
Thank you a lot, Jean-Michel. Thank you for this invitation at the European Parliament. It's a real honor for me as a true European citizen, a researcher, and a consultant to be there today. So to follow the introduction by Jean-Michel, so we've looked at 14 countries in Europe, and as Jean-Michel mentioned, so there's a diverse approach by the European Commission with regard to the different regimes in Europe. But at the very beginning, there's also a very diverse situations in the different countries. And amazingly, European Commission is adding heterogeneity by its different bodies. It's, well, having an heterogeneous situation, it's not very amazing considering subsidiarity, but that the European action is increasing that, it's more striking to us as economic researchers. So if we can go to the next slide. So, well, the objective of the study is quite obvious. Well, it was, to our knowledge, never done, so it was very exciting for us as researchers to enter this brand new field. And it was also very exciting to us to try to understand what are the drivers of the European actions with this regard. Even if we are in a very diversified situations, we developed a unified framework to present the different situations in a unified way in order to be able to compare them. And we have done so looking at, let's say, 3 different blocks. The first block related to the institutional enforcement of hydro regimes, in particular looking at the different types and the authorities granting those rights. The second block relates to the rights themselves and the process for granting them, their duration, whether it's a competitive process or not to grant them, and the rights associated or the rules associated with these rights. And at the very end, the obligations related to the rights, in particular in terms of investment and environmental obligations. I will illustrate some of these points in the following slides with maps, mainly if you have questions where for some of the other missing points, there are backup slides. So first element is the heterogeneity at the national level. As you will see, we have different duration, different process to grant the rights, in particular in terms of competitive openness, etc., etc. So if we look first at the, let's say, in terms of obligations, in particular environmental obligations, we see very different situations from countries that want to have an environmental assessment, whatever happened, so whatever the size of the power plant, wherever it locates. So it's the case, for instance, in Sweden, Poland, Bulgaria, or Portugal. And you have also countries where you have a threshold in terms of capacity of power plants. That's the case in Italy or Austria, or also in Germany, and other countries where you have environmental impact assessment that are mandatory only in sensitive areas. So that's the case for the countries here colored in blue. So Spain, France, and Great Britain, Finland, and Greece. You have also, well, it's not obvious here, unfortunately, different constraints in terms of residual flows, where, for instance, you have some countries that have to restore residual flow, for instance, in Austria, or other countries where the constraints in terms of residual flow, so the part of water flow that has to remain free despite the installation of hydropower plants can be quite high, for instance, in France, where it goes up to 15, almost 20% of the flows as a whole. If we can go on the next slide, Ilaria. So another main differences between the different regimes is the duration of the rights. It's speaking, well, for investors, it's very important because it determines the duration for you to recover your investment. So the shorter the duration of the right, the shorter the duration for you to recover your investment. So the riskier your investment with this regard, and the less profitable it may then be. So it's the case for the countries colored in blue, where mostly, or with blue color, so mostly for rights granted in the UK after 2003, or also in Greece. Or otherwise, you see that in most of the countries you have an allocation of the rights for at least 15 years, and it goes up to 80 years in the countries colored in, well, I don't see very well the colors naturally, but it's something like yellow here. Otherwise, you have other countries where the rights are granted for an unlimited duration. So, well, you do whatever you do once you have the rights, and that you fulfill your obligations related to these rights, which, of course, change a lot the, well, your profitability of your investment. If you can go. Then the competitive, well, the competitive process, it was already mentioned previously. So we have only 3 countries that are in the process of implementing a competitive process, let's say, for renewing and granting right to use hydropower, so namely Spain, France, and Italy. We have Switzerland and Portugal, where you have competition only for attribution of rights, but not for renewal. And, well, for the rest of the countries we looked at, so mainly in the eastern part of the map, you see that you have no competitive process. It's on a first-come, first-served basis, with no competitive tenders either for renewing or granting the rights. So now for the where we are more surprised, it's well, at the European level. Jean-Michel already mentioned that we see non-coordinated, or we see non-coordinated action from the different EU bodies, and also, well, from our point of view. No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, no problem. We see, well, looking at the hydropower matter, we see quite an inconsistent action at the European level, because if we assess, let's say, the competitive openness of the different process implemented in each country, here illustrated by red and green colored in the first column. In the central column, and we compare that to any opening of a competition of a procedure for competitive infringement. Here we see no consistency between the competitive openness of the hydropower market and any opening of a procedure for competitive for competition infringement. So for us as economists, it's quite striking to see no relationship between the two. You can go. And this, in our point of view, also raises a problem with regard. You can go, Ilaria, please. Even the incentive for the country asked to open their market, indeed to open the market. The hydropower market, because they see no reciprocity. So whatever happens, they will be losers. So that's a big deal with this regard. And well, its heterogeneity as a whole, whether it comes naturally from subsidiarity or whether it comes from the European actions, well, distorts the European power market. And while we are talking about an energy union, from our point of view, it's a problem, because it creates distortions, and it will create inefficiency, and also we then raise the constraints in our goal to fulfill, to have a sustainable power market with this regard. So as a conclusion, I think you have understood that we have very diversified hydropower regime, even we have as a lot of diversity. Well, with adding to that negligible actions of the European body, at least from our point of view, and looking at the hydropower market. And, well, with unequal pressure for the implementation of, or for the opening of competitive procedure to grant rights, hydropower rights. And, well, at the very end, at least from our point of view, the question should be asked whether it's needed to have an harmonization with this regard. As economists, we think yes. Then the question is how to harmonize. But in order to have really a level playing field with this regard, for this so important energy source, hydropower, that is very central in the fulfillment of sustainable and competitive power market. Thank you very much.
Grazie a lei per questa ulteriore, diciamo, spiegazione e illustrazione. Io penso che possiamo dedicare un po' del nostro tempo a una discussione aperta tra i presenti e quindi domande o interventi. E, vorrei ringraziare oltre a tutti voi, ma i nostri colleghi che sono presenti, il collega Paul Rübig, Dorfman, Rivasi, Zanolato, Zoffoli, Salini. Se ho dimenticato qualcuno vi prego di scusarmi, è un problema solamente ottico. Chi chiede la parola? Prego, Rübig, Paul Rübig,
yes,
collega della Commissione Industria e anche dello STOA, vero?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's a very good presentation because it's always important to see how can we be better engaged in the renewable energy and how can we reach the target of CO2 reduction. So hydropower plays a central role in getting the right activities, and it's crucial that also in hydropower competition is organized. And of course, we have different systems of rights within Europe. And of course, if there is a public procurement, then it's no problem because it's transparent and everybody could be part of the public procurement. Or you have an ownership concept like we have it in Austria. And of course, if you have an ownership, at any time you can buy or sell the hydropower plant. And of course, the concession which you get, the systems are different in Europe. So it's not a harmonized system. It's a system of mutual recognition, where of course we have different systems in Europe. So because in Austria the hydropower plant are owned by the companies, if we now would change the system, that would lead to a lot of problems. Expropriation would take place. And so I think it's very important to see that it's a transparent system and that the harmonization is not in any case the best solution. So, but the study shows pretty well the difference within European Union, and difference in the system is not always bad if it's working with competition. And in some countries in Europe, we miss the competition in this area, and that's why the European Commission, I think, is taking care of this. Thank you.
Grazie Paul, la parola alla collega Rivasi e poi al collega Dantin che non avevo citato prima.
Merci de cet exposé, mais je reste sur ma faim. Parce que vous dites, bon, il faut harmoniser, ok, on est d'accord, hein, on est dans l'Europe, donc il faut harmoniser. Et puis lorsqu'on regarde chaque pays, chacun a une stratégie qui lui est un peu spécifique. Et puis en même temps, on voit que la France, enfin moi je suis française, donc je vais défendre un peu la France quand même, il faut qu'elle ouvre ses marchés. En même temps, on voit que l'Allemagne a exclu ses barrages de la concurrence, que la Suède est en train de lorgner sur les barrages en France, alors que ces barrages sont sous le régime de l'autorisation publique. Ensuite, on voit que la Norvège, eh bien, ces exploitations hydrauliques sont obligatoirement accordées à une structure publique pour une durée illimitée. Alors, on va pousser la France à mettre ces barrages avec un appel d'offres, et on voit que les autres pays lorgnent sur la France par rapport à ces barrages, alors qu'eux-mêmes, ils ont bloqué leur marché. Donc, on est en concurrence déloyale. Voilà. Alors, moi, je trouve que c'est ça qu'il faut aborder. C'est que, alors, nous, on va défendre notre système public. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est des barrages qui ont été payés par les finances publiques, qui sont complètement amortis, qu'on a l'expérience de nos autoroutes qu'on a filées au privé, et c'est maintenant que ça rapporte, et on va filer ça au privé. Enfin, moi, je suis cash, hein. Je leur dis, si, alors, je voudrais une réponse de la Commission, parce que si la Commission, c'est vraiment le marché ouvert et filer ça à du privé qui va se faire un bénéfice qui sera pour le privé, donc les actionnaires, mais pas pour le public, même si, entre parenthèses, EDF en France n'a pas toujours fonctionné pour le grand public. Mais enfin, bon, c'est après des problèmes franco-français. Mais vous voyez, moi, je demande des comptes à la Commission en disant, mais qu'est-ce que vous nous faites, là? Est-ce que vous êtes pour le libéralisme, tous azimuts, ou est-ce que vous êtes sur l'intérêt général? Nous, on va défendre l'intérêt général. Il n'est pas normal que des contribuables français, ou ça peut se passer ailleurs, d'ailleurs en Suède, ou en Norvège, etc., ont financé ça, et qu'après, on fasse des cadeaux pour le privé. Voilà. Moi, c'est une question idéologique, presque. Mais pour qui on se bagarre? Pour le privé ou pour l'intérêt général?
Per favore, à la parole.
Oui, merci pour cette présentation. Quand on lit un peu plus dans le détail vos documents, on voit, vous ne l'avez pas remis en évidence, qu'un barrage, ce n'est pas simplement un ouvrage hydroélectrique. Un barrage dans un territoire, c'est, avec l'histoire, bien plus. Ça devient un équipement rural, un équipement d'animation, un équipement un peu comme un autre. Mais un barrage, généralement, c'est dans une région un peu montagneuse. Ça peut même être dans des vallées très montagneuses. Et à ce moment-là, un barrage n'est pas un élément isolé. Un barrage appartient à une chaîne, et ce qui se passe de l'amont vers l'aval nécessite de la cohérence. Or, jusqu'à présent, dans les textes communautaires, cette cohérence géographique, cette cohérence de fonctionnement, cette cohérence sécuritaire n'a été mise en évidence nulle part. Quid si demain il arrive un accident sur une chaîne de barrage avec plusieurs exploitants différents en termes de recherche de responsabilité? C'est une question que vous n'avez pas abordée. Est-ce que vous avez un éclairage à partir de votre étude sur ces questions de sécurité?
Siete d'accordo? Io penso che è arrivata Madame Donnelly, che è la direttrice delle energie rinnovabili, e c'erano altri interventi? Possiamo farli successivamente, diamo la parola alla Commissione, poi concludiamo l'open discussion tra noi, le risposte, ma soprattutto le conclusioni del collega. Prego, Madame, a vous la parola.
Thank you very much indeed, and sorry to interrupt the discussion, which I must say looks to me as if it's a lively discussion with lots of very valuable points being raised. Maybe I could just take a few moments to present a little bit some of the policies that are currently under development this year, and that will hopefully set a frame for how we will go forward in the energy system into the future. You will be aware, of course, that we've done the energy strategy last year, Energy Union strategy, and that 2016 is our year of delivery. And it means that in effect, we will revise, revisit, renew, update almost all of the legislation in the energy space this year. I have to say, from a practical point of view, this is a nightmare, but I'll leave that to one side. It has perhaps an unforeseen advantage in that it has forced us, certainly within the Commission, to take a much more joined-up approach to all of the pieces of legislation. it would never have been thought of to link, for example, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive with the Electricity Market Design Directive. No, nothing really to do with each other. But of course, they are inextricably linked. Buildings are the virtual powerhouses of Europe, so of course they have their place in the electricity market design. So the electricity market design needs to adapt, and likewise the buildings need to respond. So I just take that as one illustration of how we are finding connections across the legislation that perhaps we hadn't realized were there, but that I believe will make the legislative picture much more complete. Less of a jigsaw with pieces missing, but rather the whole picture as we go forward. And as part of that process, it has meant that we've had to have, I would say, a much clearer view as to what it is we want in the energy system. And of course, we want our three objectives, you know, security of supply, competitive and affordable prices, and sustainability. That's clear, we want these. But we also want to have a system that functions and functions well. And even though electricity represents only about 20–22% of our final energy consumption, because of course heating and cooling is 50%, transport about 33%, nonetheless we spend a lot of our time talking about electricity because it is quite pan-European, and all of the member states are hugely interdependent one with another in terms of its functioning. It's also true to say that electricity, as we go forward to 2050 and beyond, potentially becomes a very important vector for energy to decarbonize. Because as we move forward, let's say heating and cooling out of fossil fuels into alternatives, and likewise in transport out of fossil fuels, electricity will have to take up quite a bit of the slack there, so the electricity system becomes even more important. And some of the thoughts that are becoming very clear for the electricity market are that, firstly, historically we have had a market into which renewables have had to fit. And I have to say, it's a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't work. So we now have come to realization that in actual fact, we now have to make the market, we have to adjust the market for renewables. And in its simplest way, what does this actually mean? It means we need an electricity market that is very, very, very flexible, that can respond to different signals, that, for example, will value the positive electron, i.e. the ones that is actually used, and will value equally the negative electron, the one that's not used, because it is as valuable to the system not to use energy at peak as it is to use energy at off-peak. So this is a very different thought process to the electricity system vis-a-vis what we had before. We need to value flexibility. You know, the wind is blowing or the sun is shining and the next thing the sun comes over and clouds over. We need to be able to ramp up facilities instantaneously to respond to the flexibility there. We also need to be able to store, because there are times when we have an abundance of free energy, effectively. We've paid for the capital investment and we have free energy, and at the moment we turn it off, which is really a terrible waste in our economy. So if we had storage, we could use that abundance of energy and put it into storage and then use it when we need it afterwards. And we need all of the players in the marketplace to be both responsible for being adults, if I could say, but also to be allowed to be adults in the marketplace. So that means, for example, the balancing responsibility, the day-ahead closure times, the gate closure times, all of these things must become much more responsive and reactive. And we can do that with the new smart technologies where we can respond much more quickly. But it also means that when we look at the services in the electricity system, we have to be very clear. And if I move specifically to hydropower, hydropower, firstly, it is very sustainable. It's a renewable energy. It represents a significant part of our energy base at the moment. And hydropower, especially, for example, pumped hydro, is a potentially very important storage mechanism. And one of the questions we have been asking ourselves is, should we identify storage as a specific entity in the electricity market? And linked to that, of course, is the question of how would you define it in such circumstances, which is not so obvious. And I suppose, coming from the difficulty of finding a definition, we are perhaps more moving in the direction of trying to be clear as to what we mean by storage. And I suppose in its most simple way, I would describe storage in two ways. You have storage, which is a cul-de-sac, and storage, which is a boomerang. And what do I mean by that? Storage, which is a cul-de-sac, means that when you have excess energy available, cheap, that you use it, you put it into a service, like, for example, heating water, district heating systems, or what we do in industry as well, and you use the service afterwards. But the difference between a cul-de-sac and a boomerang is, a boomerang, you put the excess energy somewhere, but then you can take electricity, you put the electricity into something, but then you can take the electricity back again. And there are two very distinct services to the electricity system. And so we think that coming out of this greater clarity of thought, that what we have to try and do is construct the services that are being offered and remunerate the services. And pumped hydro, and hydro itself, will be able to offer both of these services and will be able to compete very effectively in the marketplace for both of these services. And that if we can maintain the clarity on the services, then I think we can support the different technologies, including hydro, including renewables, including the others that come on stream, because we will be able to value the service that they bring to the energy system. So this is just to give you some idea of the kind of thought process that we're going through in terms of preparing the texts for later this year. It means that this kind of thought process will find itself coming through in revisions of the energy efficiency, for example, directives. It'll be also in the renewables directive, and of course it will be in the market design and the security of supply directive for electricity, because these are the kinds of ideas that are forming in terms of how we need to upgrade and update the electricity market so that we can respond to the changes, respond to the new technologies, renewables, but also the ICT, and be prepared for the next decade and for the changes that will happen to the energy system going forward from 2020 up to 2030, and we know what the targets are there. So in that context, hydropower clearly has a role to play. But you've had a lot of discussion as to the way member states deal with this and that and the other. It's true, they're not the same. But I suppose the overarching question is, are there impediments to hydropower offering the services that I've described to the electricity market? And if there are impediments, then we need to act, because we cannot accept that there would be impediments. If the national regimes are, some are slightly pink and some are slightly blue and some are slightly green, if it doesn't prevent the service being offered and being remunerated in the marketplace, well then perhaps we don't need to spend so much energy on harmonizing the structures. So the real focus is, can the service be offered competitively and can it be remunerated in the new structures that we're talking about? Maybe if I could just take a small other element that I think is actually quite important, because hydro is an area where, and I don't want to get into the details of what are the environmental considerations and what are the logistics and what are the infrastructure requirements around large-scale hydro, but rather to focus for a moment on small-scale hydro, especially river-run type hydro, where the research is now coming through. It's starting to manifest itself, where as we go forward, we expect we will be able to capture that energy smaller scale by all means, but nonetheless much more ubiquitous and more cost-effective in terms of its establishment because it's not very large scale, and it can be used locally. So I think an important development in this space is also in the research area to allow us to be innovative, to develop new approaches to using this very valuable resource, and to be able to benefit from that resource in the markets that we are setting up and going forward with. So that's just a very quick intervention as to some of the thought processes that are going on. As I say, this is the year of delivery. We have a lot of pieces of legislation that are being prepared this year. And these are the kinds of thought processes that we're carrying forward in terms of preparing the text. So I hope it's covered some of the issues that you've been debating during the debate today. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Grazie, credo che ci abbia dato molti spunti in questo intervento che lei ha definito di contesto, ma che ha individuato molti punti. A noi interesserebbe anche molto sviluppare i servizi possono essere resi in modo competitivo, lei ha detto, e quali ostacoli ci sono. Ecco, qui siamo anche oggi ad esaminare alcuni ostacoli precisi, ma certamente le cose che lei ci ha detto sono molto interessanti, anche quelle sull'idroelettrico a piccola scala, che deve essere una strada certamente da perseguire molto di più. C'erano altre domande, credo, a conclusione, no? Avevo dimenticato qualche other question? No. Allora, se non ci sono particolari elementi di risposta nelle domande che sono state fatte, volevate intervenire per le risposte, ma io darei subito la parola al mio collega che può gestire questa fase finale, sia le eventuali risposte sia le sue conclusioni. Grazie.
Merci. Moi, je suis ravi de cette réunion parce qu'il était urgent que la question soit traitée par la Commission. Et les accusations contre la France de fraude à la concurrence et qui peuvent se poursuivre en Italie, si j'ai bien compris, posent de réels problèmes sur ce sujet de l'hydraulique, puisque les systèmes, j'aimerais bien que la Commission écoute, les systèmes sont très différents d'un pays à l'autre, et donc on ne peut pas aujourd'hui mettre en concurrence telles que les situations sont dans chaque pays. Je crois que, clairement, où la concurrence est partout, dans tous les pays européens, où elle n'est pas. Moi, je crois qu'il n'y a pas 36 alternatives, d'après ce que j'ai entendu. Je pense qu'effectivement, tout le monde ouvre son marché ou personne ne l'ouvre. Puisque si on veut entrer dans un dispositif de concurrence dite libre et non faussée, il faut qu'effectivement tout le monde joue le jeu. Si elle est ouverte à la concurrence, elle doit obéir à un certain nombre de règles. Bien sûr, la durée des concessions, les questions de respect de l'environnement et beaucoup d'autres règles qui doivent être communes. Parce qu'on a vu sur la durée des concessions, par exemple, il y en a qui sont illimitées et d'autres qui sont à 15 ou 20 ans. Donc ça n'a pas de sens de comparer les uns avec les autres. Donc il y a obligation, je crois, d'harmoniser les règles. Il faut dire que la particularité de l'hydraulique, elle est double. C'est la capacité qu'elle a à stocker l'électricité. Et pas forcément en remontant l'eau dans les barrages, mais c'est un stockage naturel. C'est-à-dire qu'on peut libérer l'eau au moment où on a besoin d'électricité. Il y a la possibilité aussi de remonter l'eau pour disposer de davantage de disponibilité aux heures de pointe, parce que c'est bien ça, c'est bien là qu'est la question. C'est bien là qu'est la question, c'est la disponibilité de l'électricité aux heures de pointe. Au moment où tous les trains démarrent, au moment où tout le monde se met à travailler, eh bien, il y a une demande beaucoup plus forte. Et ça pose un problème de fond. C'est-à-dire qu'au moment où la demande est forte, le prix de l'électricité augmente. Et donc, il y a là une vraie difficulté si on considère que certains peuvent bénéficier de ces barrages avec un prix de vente de l'électricité très élevé et d'autres se contenter d'une production d'électricité pas chère. Donc, il y a toute une organisation à mettre en place. Et comme l'a dit M. Dantin, à juste titre, il faut aussi que nous soyons conscients que l'électricité et les barrages hydrauliques, c'est aussi la vie dans la vallée. Et il n'y a pas que le barrage dans la vallée, il y a aussi tout ce qui tourne autour, avec tous les risques que ça représente. Imaginons qu'un barrage casse parce qu'il est mal entretenu par une entreprise, tous les barrages en aval sont dans la difficulté. Et donc il y a là une vraie cohérence de vallée dont il faut tenir compte, y compris sur les phénomènes halieutiques. Parce que les poissons, eux, il faut aussi, pour se reproduire, qu'ils remontent la rivière. Donc il y a aussi là des contraintes qu'il faut mettre en place pour permettre cela. Et donc il est très, très clair qu'aujourd'hui, ce dossier doit être traité par la Commission dans sa globalité. Dans sa globalité. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne peut pas aujourd'hui dire on va mettre en concurrence. On ne peut pas mettre en concurrence dans la situation actuelle, la situation d'aujourd'hui. Si on veut mettre en concurrence, il faut prendre un certain nombre de précautions, un certain nombre de dispositions qui permettront effectivement une concurrence dite libre et non faussée. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, moi, je ne vois pas comment on peut mettre en concurrence des services de production d'électricité par hydraulique, dans la mesure où il y a autant de différences entre les pays européens. Je crois que ça me paraît assez clair. Et donc, il faut qu'on travaille là-dessus. Et moi, je suis prêt, au titre des services publics, à commencer à travailler là-dessus, parce que l'électricité, c'est aussi un service public. Il y en a beaucoup de pays qui pensent que c'est un service public. Moi, je suis de ceux-là. Et ce service public, il doit être équitable. Il doit permettre à tous les citoyens d'en bénéficier à des prix identiques. C'est ça, le service public. Et si on donne toutes les concessions au privé, ça ne sera plus du service public. Ça veut dire qu'on aura le privé qui cherchera évidemment à faire le plus de bénéfices possible, le moins d'entretien possible, avec tous les risques que ça représente pour la sécurité des citoyens. Donc je crois, Madame, qu'il est très important que la Commission prenne ce dossier à bras-le-corps, parce que c'est un dossier particulièrement important. C'est vrai que l'hydraulique est une énergie propre, ça il faut le rappeler, qui n'a pas d'émissions de gaz carbonique, ça c'est très important. C'est une énergie disponible, c'est une énergie renouvelable, et donc il faut qu'on soit conscient de l'importance de l'hydraulique, mais qu'on ne fasse pas n'importe quoi. C'est-à-dire qu'on regarde de près, et moi je suis ravi de l'étude qui a été faite, que vous avez présentée, parce que c'est une étude qui dit bien les choses, qui dit parfaitement les choses. Et donc à partir de cette étude-là, moi je crois que la Commission devrait faire des propositions pour que, alors si on veut la mettre en concurrence, pour que les conditions de la concurrence soient réunies. Je crois que c'est ça le fond du problème. En tout cas, moi je suis ravi de cette présentation et je suis ravi de l'affluence qu'il y a, parce que tout le monde a bien compris que c'est un sujet particulièrement important. Merci.
Merci, monsieur.
Je pense que notre temps c'est terminé, c'est comme ça. Quanto tempo avevamo la sala? Ecco, allora abbiamo pochi minuti ancora. Io vorrei fare una proposta ai colleghi. Se siete d'accordo, è arrivato ancora il collega Morgano, noi potremmo ritrovarci, noi deputati presenti oggi, potremmo ritrovarci dopo Pasqua, per esempio, per riflettere anche quale atto parlamentare possiamo fare per interloquire con la Commissione europea. Se noi abbiamo, come mi sembra, una condivisione di alcuni punti relativi a questa questione, dell'importanza che riveste nell'unione energetica e nel mercato energetico, della necessità che le regole della concorrenza non siano tali da danneggiare lo sviluppo di questo settore invece di incentivarlo, forse potremmo trovarci, fare un piccolo comitato tra noi colleghi per non lasciare cadere la questione e sulla base anche di questo studio che ci offre davvero elementi non generici ma molto concreti, in uno spirito di unione europea, non di, come ha detto lei esordendo, insomma, per crearla quest'unione, non per diminuirla, noi magari proporremo alla Commissione qualche proposta, qualche atto parlamentare che potremmo fare, anche d'intesa, insomma, per favorire, diciamo, un passaggio che a noi sembra importante, che sia la direzione energia a guidare e a coordinare i molti aspetti che sono richiamati in questo settore. Quindi se non ci sono altri interventi a conclusione, direi che possiamo lasciarci con una certa soddisfazione, apprezzando molto il vostro lavoro, apprezzando chi ci ha aiutato a organizzare questo incontro e ci ha posto nelle condizioni di poter oggi discutere così diciamo, intensamente, sia pure in un tempo limitato, ripromettendoci di riprendere questo tema. Gli altri presenti che non sono potuti intervenire possono farci avere le loro osservazioni per il lavoro che noi parlamentari, qui rappresentiamo diversi gruppi e diversi paesi, potremo incaricarci di fare. Col mio collega con cui abbiamo co-ospitato questo incontro vi ringraziamo ancora e penso che ci sia un piccolo aperitivo o qualcosa. Grazie a voi. Madame, merci. Si vous êtes d'accord, on peut...